Hi, this is Harriet Grayson, your host and producer of Community Culture Showcase. Happy New Year to all of my audience, and I hope that you have splendid ideas for yourself. We're always looking for great ideas, so if you have an opportunity, if there's a guest out there, if there's a musical act, if there's a poet, if there's a writer who would like to have an audience, I'd be happy to interview them. So go ahead and contact me at graysonharriet@gmail.com. And we are very fortunate today to have two poets with us, Charlie and Victoria, and they have very, very different subject matters, but I think you'll enjoy it all. And I think that 2017 should certainly be the year of the arts, and we all want to enjoy them. So I am very fortunate and happy to introduce them. Victoria and Charlie. Charlie and I know each other for many years, from many venues, and I'm really happy to have you. Victoria, we just met today, and you are a fascinating character and have been able to take all of your wonderful experiences, some good, maybe some bad, and mold them together and create poetry from that. And that is a wonderful message to our audience, because it gives people out there who say, oh, I have an interesting story to tell. Well, you can use that information to create poetry, short stories, novels, nonfiction. So we want to encourage our audience to take you guys as models and go forward and bring richness into the lives of others. So why don't we start with Victoria? If you tell us a little bit about yourself. I see you're all dressed in red, white, and blue, so one might assume some kind of patriotic message. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll have Charlie tell us a little bit about himself, and then we'd have an opportunity for poetry reading.
Sounds good. I am the wife of an Air Force pilot who's deceased and buried in Arlington, and two children who were in the war, all pilots. We're all pilots in our house who have seen action, and I worked with the military, and after 40 plus years of hearing stories from pilots and other people in the area, I decided to sit down and write them. And I'm actually a storyteller, writing poems in the format of poems to get, and I've heard so many wonderful stories. One about a friend of my husband's who went to college, and he was a POW in Vietnam, and his wife thought he was dead after 6 years. And thank goodness Jane Fonda went over there, and we're so happy she did, because his wife had gotten remarried. He was declared dead at 6 years, and he was in Hanoi Hilton, and he stuck his head next to Jane, went and winked at his wife, and she knew it was him. She divorced her husband, and we all waited for him to get off the plane in '72. So thank you, Jane. You did something good. So, and many other stories that are similar, and about a stoning on my son, which he was being stoned. One of the poems I'll read are about that. And I went to see the Benghazi movie recently, and the same thing happened with one of the Navy SEALs, a young kid with a slingshot, trying to take this man out, and the older men, elders, just saying, Allah be praised. And I sat there with my mouth open in the movie theater thinking, this happened to my son 12 years ago. So I went home and wrote that as a story. And there's just many others.
Right. Let me ask you, how did you choose poetry as the medium in order to express yourself?
I retired from work and wanted to use my mind, and been in education and counseling for years, and wrote, and decided to write, and was encouraged by my husband, and decided to write, my new husband. Their husband's not here, but 14 years ago, but anyhow, yeah.
And why poetry versus some other kind of art form you could have taken?
I just like writing. I don't know. I really don't know.
Okay.
I just like to have visuals, short, sweet,
right,
and get the point across. I don't like being wordy, even though I'm wordy when I'm speaking.
No, not at all, not at all. All right, so Charlie, you and I go back a few years from the Norwich Arts Center, which is a wonderful, wonderful community-oriented organization that allows people from all over the community, and I don't only mean the Norwich community, to come up and display their arts, usually poetry, writing. I myself have been blessed to have your approval and come on to your stage over there at the Oates Theater. So tell us a little bit about yourself and about that wonderful theater that you've got up there.
So I worked all my life in business, and was able to retire a little bit early, and didn't take too long before I got involved with the Norwich Arts Center. I've been a poet all my life, so it was a kind of a natural move for me to make. And so the Norwich Arts Center is an all-service arts organization, and it's also all volunteer, which is amazing for all that we're doing. So we have a gallery. We actually have 2 galleries on the first floor, and on the third floor we have a 135-seat theater,
Right.
Donald L. Oat Theater. And so we put on music productions, we put on plays, we have open mics, we have movies, we show movies with regularity, and various other things. We rent out the space sometimes.
Okay.
When
If
we can
people want
find
to
time
see a
available.
schedule of your great events, do you have a website that people can turn to?
Yeah, we have the upcoming, the most recent, the events that are going to occur
Right.
soonest will usually be on our website, which is norwicharts.org.
NorwichArts.org.
Right.
Great,
Right.
great. That's wonderful.
And we also have a Facebook page, and so there's a lot of stuff out on the Facebook page as
Also
well.
Norwich Arts?
Norwich Arts Center.
Norwich Arts Center, great. So
Right.
people can go on Facebook and take a look and see what's going on.
Right.
They can go to your website and
Right.
take a look and see what's going on.
Right.
That's great. What is coming
Yeah,
soon
okay.
to everyone nearby?
So we have upcoming. We're going to have we have a series called Miss Lottie's Cafe, and Miss Lottie's Cafe is a musical program, but with a historical bent to it.
Okay.
And so what we usually do is feature a historical artist and have someone in the local area who's a outstanding musician will come in and portray that person. So in February, we're going to have Nichelle Rollins, who's a singer in the area, and she's going to be singing songs that Bessie Smith made famous.
How cool.
Yeah, so it should really be great. And she'll be backed up by the Jim Hunter Trio, which is very prominent in the area, very, very, very talented group. And then we're going to have another Miss Lottie's event in April, and that's going to be on Latin jazz with
okay.
Rufus Davis,
Okay.
who's a pianist and actually is part of the Jim Hunter Trio, is going to be doing Latin jazz, and he'll have some musicians with him
Wow,
doing that.
great. Any singers? This is just straight music.
I don't believe he's going to have any
Okay.
singers in April.
Okay.
But that April event is part of a new initiative that we're starting called New Visions and Voices. And New Visions and Voices is what we're doing every 6 months. We're featuring an ethnic group or some group inside of our community. So for April, we're featuring Latino art.
Right.
So we're going to have a juried show in the gallery. We're going to have, going brain dead. We're going to have a movie.
Okay.
Which is going to be set in. It's a Colombian movie, and it's set in the Colombian Amazon.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. So that
So
should
be
be
Spanish
really cool.
and then English subtitles, that kind of thing?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Presumably. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. Gosh, there's another event. I'm just like losing it.
That's all right. You'll
But
just
there-
remember. It'll come back.
Oh well. There's the Latin jazz,
Right.
and then there's the at the end of the month we're going to have a literary event. And
Oh.
we're going to be honoring Bessie Reyna, who is a Latino poet and activist from the Manchester area, and so we're going to have several very prominent poets in to share the stage with her and to honor her for her many years of poetry and activism. And we're going to start off the day in the afternoon, so it's going to be like about a 6 or 8 hour
Wow,
event.
okay.
We're going to start off in the afternoon with some dance programs, and then we're going to have an opportunity for people in the Latino community to come forward and tell their stories, how they ended up in southeastern Connecticut.
Right, so
How did
kind of like
that
a oral
happen?
history. Are you going to record it?
We don't have plans to do that right now, but it sounds like a good idea. Yeah.
Well, maybe you can come on the show and they could we could make a recording, this kind of recording of them actually giving us examples of their oral histories. I think that's a wonderful way to preserve them.
Yeah, let me make a note
Yeah,
on that.
there you go. So, it's we want to use. I love to use this show as a venue for other things that can come on. So to share and make. I know that your organization is an asset to the community, so I like to be able to promote that asset to other people within the community. And of course, with YouTube, which is what we use to mount these stuff. People can see it all over the world. I mean, you have family or friends outside of the country, for example. You go to YouTube, when we mount this thing on YouTube, they can watch it whenever they want.
Wow.
So that's,
great.
we want to use technology in our own way to promote our local arts.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful.
Yeah,
that's wonderful.
That's really good. It's wonderful what you're doing with this show.
Oh, thank
And,
you.
It's so great to be, with the Norwich Arts Center and able to, make a theater and a gallery available to artists so they have a place to play. It's a big sandbox.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So Victoria, tell us a little bit about one of your wonderful poems that you want to share with my audience. If you want to give a little intro about what inspired you, perhaps, to write it, and then we'd love to hear it.
Well, let me get this. One of the poems I wrote about was my daughter. She was a Navy pilot, and she got out of the service after 10 years, and she used to fly right around where her brother flew in the war zone, which I never knew. But I was on an elevator. My daughter was also a model before she went into the service.
Wow, okay.
So not your typical pilot girl.
No.
And
I'm sure she doesn't look like Tom Cruise.
no, thank God. But she, more Nicole Kidman type.
Oh, okay, good.
And I'm in an elevator with her friend when she's in graduate school, and this other girl gets on, and she's drop dead gorgeous. If you've seen Quantico, the dark-haired girl, she looked just like her. Perfect body, perfect face, very sweet. And there was a little story on that elevator, as again, I knew nothing about, and then I hear these things, and I'm like shocked. IDF is the name of the poem.
Okay.
Met on an elevator, 20 floors up. Two striking girls, one dark, auburn flowing hair, cascading down her long, young-formed, hard-toned frame, with curves anybody, even I, would kill for now. Face of an angel, with ringlets encircling her aquiline, perfect-featured face. She says, "Hello," as we are doing the polite formalities of life. "Oh," my daughter says, "this is my friend Rachel. She is the best sharpshooter in the Israeli army." Shocked and like surprised, I hear in reply, "Oh no, you're the Top Gun pilot saving all those lives." And to this day, I don't know anything about what happened or where, because as a mother, you never want to know, and you just don't ask anymore.
Oh, yes.
You just don't ask. You'll hear it eventually.
Okay.
It all comes out.
Yes,
But
yes.
that's one of my poems.
And is that in your book here?
Yes.
Okay, why don't you just tell us a little bit about the book?
The book is 2 stars. And
Show the cover to the camera. There you
There.
go. All right.
And it's reflections of over 40 years of being a military wife and mother, of stories I've heard from my pilots, eating out with pilots, my husband, students, because I was a military person liaison in the school system for many years and had students come back. And I started thinking about some of the things I heard. My son actually is in Smithsonian on a trophy called the McTay Trophy, and it is 5 feet solid gold, and it has the Wright brothers, Eddie Rickenbacker, Jimmy Doolittle, and he and his crew had saved 84 men on top of a hill in the beginning of Afghanistan the first couple years. And the best part of it is he got to tell my husband before my husband passed, which was really nice. And he had written a letter. Could I read the letter?
Yes, of course.
Oh. He had written this letter to us. I probably need my glasses. And this flag is part of that. When pilots fly, they take a flag with them.
Okay.
And this flag was in the cockpit with him.
Okay.
And he said,
Can you show this a little bit?
yep. He said, this mission was routine until the last 2 weeks. My last 10 missions were definitely something different, and I definitely have my 2 war story minimum for the VFW. We did shoot, and there are less of the enemy than there were before long, with destroying other targets, some large secondaries. Our best missions involved covering heel infields, exfils, and one included getting a company of Army troops out of trouble, getting their wounded out. The short story is they were stuck in a valley, surrounded by enemy taking casualties all day. And we came in and eliminated the threat and made a cold LZ landing zone for medevac helos out of a hot one. We probably had saved at least 1 helo because the first mortar round impacted about 20 meters behind it. The enemy got off only 1 more round. It missed before we eliminated the threat. The greatest honor was meeting the people afterward. I got to see the evacuees on the plane when I was flying home in 2 days. They were all wounded because what they had done every night for 3 nights, they stood up when they heard the roar of an AC-130 gunship and waved, here we are, and each one had gotten shot, all 84. They all came home together, and on the way home, I'm still too fully awed to explain the meetings. I did get to meet a few real heroes, though.
That's very sweet.
Yeah, I was, again, stories you don't really want to
Right.
know about your children.
Right.
But he had written this, and my son never, people that are in wars never talk about him, and that was one of the things that we had heard.
Did you happen to write a poem about that?
No, I did not.
Oh, well, there you go. There's for the next book of poetry.
I have another one called Wings, Wings, Wings. Would you like me to read it?
Absolutely, please.
Okay. This is about my daughter. There's about 5 pilots and myself, and they always like wings to eat. So we went.
Literally wings, the chicken wings. Okay.
Wings to eat, and we're eating wings. I'm sorry. Oh, you know what? I didn't take it off in there. I'll tell you the story.
All right.
Here's the gunship.
Okay.
got my
Beautiful
son.
sunset. Yes. Yes.
one of the
Nice
pictures.
yellow and orange.
We were out to dinner, and we're sitting around a table eating wings, and I hear my daughter say she had worked at the White House and she had also worked at the Pentagon, and said that she had just written up the Medal of Honor for Murphy, who had Lieutenant Murphy, who had just received it because he threw himself on a grenade and blew up, and he was the first Medal of Honor in Afghanistan. And my son leans over and says, well, I could have gotten that. And she said, really? And he said, yeah. And the other pilots are listening, and he said, well, I was running around the base where I shouldn't have been and felt something hit me. And something hit me again. And I looked, and it was stones. And a young man was, with a slingshot, setting stones to my temple. And she said, well, I've got a better one than that. Guess what? You know when you're in Iraq flying around, that 300 feet, taking care of the guys on the ground at night? I was up above you, and I was told to drop bombs on you in my P3. And I heard your voice and decided maybe that wasn't such a great idea. So that was another story that it's called Wings, Wings, Wings.
Okay. Do you have a poem that you want to read us?
There's one about the stoning, yes.
Please.
Deployed in Afghanistan, running alone inside where I didn't belong. Hard breezes as the sand blows in my face and eyes. A stone hits my temple. Christ! Allah Akbar, shouts the boy as he reloads his sling. The group of older men watch, smiling, rocking, nodding, saying, Mohammed be praised. And as I said before, this was the same incident I saw in a movie
Right.
last year.
Right.
And this happened 12 years ago. Do you want me to read another one?
Absolutely, please.
Another one, I have a lot of friends from Vietnam, and I've given talks, and some people don't even know about Vietnam or the wall in D.C., even though it moves and the people have seen it. There's over 58,000 people's names on there now. And I wrote one about that because, I don't know, I have friends on there, maybe you do too. The wall speaks for itself, of valor and acts beyond the Greek gods of old. Many speak the names Ray, William, John, Butch, Dennis, Bubba, not remembering how they became part of this black monument. Each telling his story of the in-country heroes or just trying to stay alive, jumping out of helos that are fighting on the ground dug in deep, dark tunnels, praying and holding on to their helmets while clutching their armor around their mud-drenched jungle bodies. The beginnings of St. Michael against Lucifer, cutting down the warriors, wielding his sword and swashing the wrongs of all the evil beings' actions. In the blackness of night, with only the moon lighting the wall, whispers can be heard like the water in the gardens of nearby fountains, bubbling with excitement, discussing what they saw that day, who came to visit, and what did they have to say, leaving flowers, stuffed animals, pins for tears from family and friends, mumbling tearful prayers as they dab away their mascara from their eyes. And the names ask, when is it my turn to visit? So.
Now, one of the things that's interesting about that we talked about off camera was that the book sales are actually being donated to some
Connecticut Rivers of Recovery, which is a local group of a wounded warrior who takes them out and actually is out of the service, and he takes them out and teaches them how to fly fish on the Housatonic or Massachusetts for the weekend. All the people that have been asked that have PTSD, and they always have a lot of people.
Oh, I bet.
And it costs them about, I think, $3,000 a person to bring them out and take them out. And they don't pay for anything, the guys. So all my profits have been going to them. And the book is doing very well. I just would like to keep it going and keep the profits going so they can keep doing this great work.
Now, if people want to just donate and don't necessarily buy your book, is there a way for people to donate to this organization?
Connecticut Rivers of Recovery
Okay,
is
that's
what
the
it
name
is.
and it's a nonprofit
Yes.
organization.
Yes, it is a nonprofit, and
Here in
they made it
Connecticut.
nonprofit. They started about a year and a half ago.
Oh, okay.
This young man had been part of the Rivers of Recovery out in the Snake River in Wyoming, and he said, "I'm going to do that locally," and that's what he's been doing. And he does a great job.
Yes, absolutely. Do you have another poem you want to read us?
Oh, I'd love to. Another one would be In Country. In Country means Vietnam for people who don't know.
All right.
I'm the man walking 40 years hence from Hanoi Hilton to a lovely rolling hill, visiting old friends, paying respects to those who never made it home, smelling that earthy green-brown ground of new soil just opened, remembering the worms in my shoes, sucking the blood out of us. This man was in Tet. Suckers everywhere in the wet, tall grass. Now seeing and enjoying the view from the rolling hills that lead to a beautiful view of cherry blossom trees and a gold dome against thatched huts and terraced rice fields, feeling the blustering wind blowing like banshees on the hill, gusting and riding through the branches saying, rest, rest, rest. This was a man that I used to have come to and talk to a lot of people, and he talked about being in the Tet Offensive. He went to Notre Dame High School, was a famous football player, and decided to go in the Marines, and was in the Tet Offensive, and told him what it was really like to be in a war. And some of the descriptions, this is mild, and a lot of people go back and just want to make sure their friends are at rest. So
Interesting.
the last one I have is Arlington, about my husband.
Sure.
We ride behind the funeral procession, 6 horses, click-clacking, on the cobblestones, perfect rhythm, slowly, gracefully sashaying, tails squatting flies. Headstones in perfect unison, neatly checkered bordered rows, lines down a hill, the last resting place of a loving Vietnam pilot, husband, soldier, father, friend. Gut-wrenching sobs, silent screams, quiet air, the deafening 21-gun salute. On a dark, cloudy day, horses clip-clop, clip-clop, the parade marches on. The funeral wagon on its way gets closer and closer to 6 in, 2 over, stopping at the final resting place. Looking up at jets, flyby formation, one plane missing. As Clydesdale's droppings dance in perfect timing to taps, erupting the mood, everyone breaking out in uncontrollable laughter. Husband saying, "Be happy, gone away, day is done."
Very nice, very nice, very nice. So we totally shift gears. I assume we won't have any war stories to share.
No more stories to share.
So, but we have an artist here. And what do you want to share with our audience today?
First of all, I just want to put out a good word to self-publishing, because that's what I've been doing.
Yes.
And, it's an alternative.
Of course.
And I think it should be respected. But it's a great opportunity for people to, gather their work together, or to write a memoir to pass on to their family, or whatever. It's a great thing. It's really a great thing, and you don't have to buy 500 books. You can just buy 5 books, and it's not expensive. So.
Yes, the whole world of technology has opened up, including in the publishing world. The idea of YouTube with this kind of studio work. There's the good and bad to everything what happens in terms of new things that go on with technology. And this is one of the definite benefits of new technology.
Yeah, it's not quite the internet, but it's amazing. It's pretty great stuff.
Absolutely. Now, I should say you are a poet of many books. Yep. If you want to tell us about each book as you read us something.
What I'm doing is writing or putting together, I've done all the writing, but I'm putting together a series of 4 books, all called Runway Lights.
Okay.
So the first book was Runway Lights, Life in the Undercloud. So I was thinking, getting ready for this, that maybe it would be nice to read poems that were set in the local area.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm not sure they're all that exactly, but I'll start with that.
He even has these cute little glasses that fold up into the size of a cigarette lighter.
It's called Getting Old.
Gracefully, though. Gracefully.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I'm going to read 2 short poems. It's from a series called Little Book Poems, and this first book is all poems in a series. And some of the series are all together, like Little Book Poems, and some of the series are sprinkled throughout the book, because that's the way I wrote them. I didn't intend for them to be a series in the beginning.
Okay.
I just had an idea that I felt like writing about again. And it actually created a pretty cool effect in the book to have these poems sprinkled through. So anyway, these are 2 of the Little Book Poems. Each thought, like the movement of a wing, brings flight to the mind. Quail bob white from the thickets, crows caw from the treetops. We stand and listen, trying to hear the lifting of wings on the morning air. And that poem and the next one are both set at Bluff Point.
Oh, okay.
I wrote these poems quite a long time ago. When I was first married, and I used to have to take my dog down to Bluff Point for a run. It was a Springer Spaniel, and if I didn't, it was hell to pay. So, so this is another one. So that one was like a spring poem. This is a winter poem. Little book, A winter mist drifts idly in from the ocean. Moisture gathers on marsh grass and freezes. It settles on sand and glistens like glass. Poor blind book, do you know? The cove is frozen. Summer heron have long ago flown south. Even goldeneye don't float on this ice. Did you hear them? Lonely footsteps break the crust of sand. A man has passed, stirring the air. The frozen dune grass rattles slightly. Up-kicked sand grains toboggan the ice sheet beach.
Very nice, very nice. Now let's show everybody the cover and tell people how they can purchase this lovely book of poetry if they want.
They're on Amazon. So
Amazon, okay,
so,
and they just have to go to Charlie Chase?
Yeah, well, if you put Charles Chase is the name, you better put in Charles Chase Poetry because otherwise
there must be a bunch of them.
It's 5,000 pages deep. So
very good.
But yeah, so then the second book was Calling Home, and this book has a lot of surreal poems and humorous poems in it, and so I thought I would.
And the concept of runaway lights, how did you?
Runway lights.
Oh, runway lights. How did you?
Yeah. That's a great question.
Yes.
I was brought up in Groton on the cove across the cove from the airport. So, my first, 18, 19 years was spent with the presence of that airport and the planes coming in. And there is nothing as beautiful as the sound of a piper cub, that's half a mile away up in the air. It is such a beautiful sound. And
so that gave you inspiration for the title.
That and, seeing the runway lights at night and sometimes stealing over to the airport and being where I wasn't supposed to be. Okay, so this poem is a true story, not. The process of holding on and letting go. A leaf is caught in my windshield wiper. At 65 miles an hour, it shakes and flutters and rattles, but won't come off. I ignore it. I ignore it real hard. I turn on the wipers. The leaf just rides the blade up and down the windshield. Even at rapid, it's all thrills for the leaf, holding on like a cowboy at rodeo. I stick my arm out, but can't stretch far enough. Forget it. Then I'm up on my knees, head and shoulders out the window, other drivers honking. What, they've never had a leaf in their wipers? It's still out of reach. I climb halfway out the window, butt on the door, feet on the seat, right hand on the steering wheel, and snatch the leaf, breaking it in half. I try to pry the rest of it loose, but can't get my fingers in the blade's armature. I sink back into my seat. There's a straightaway, so I swing myself out onto the hood. Lying on my stomach, I pin the wiper and pull the leaf out in little pieces, every last bit. I crawl up the windshield and am reaching an arm through the window to gain a grip on the wheel when the car begins bouncing and bucking wildly before plunging into the woods. Branches slap and gouge, pushing me off the roof. I desperately clutch at anything. There's a loud crash, then suddenly it's quiet and still. I'm caught on a branch. Below me, down a gully, the nose of my car half encircles a tree trunk. The tops of the trees all around me are bare, except for a single leaf at the end of my branch, twitching nervously in the breeze.
And that is a true story?
No.
Because I can tell you, just as a point of interest, that I have a cousin who had, as a 15-year-old stupid kid, or 16 years old, was driving on the Interstate 5, and something went on his windshield, and he stupidly opened the door to take it out because the kid is stupid, and he got swept underneath the car.
Ooh.
Wow.
And was severely injured,
Wow.
just because, just like your character you're describing, some stupid kid who just a little
That's
irritant. You could have
amazing.
left the damn thing alone, and this poor kid suffered actually permanent damage to his
Yeah.
brain. So yours could be at least nothing of great harm comes.
Yeah,
Just a car.
I had a 45-minute commute, to work and 45 minutes back, and so I did a lot of driving. And so that was the inspiration for a poem like that. And I also had a poem where I can't remember exactly what I did in the poem, but I ended up under the wheels of my own car. So
Oh, wow.
if you can imagine it, it can happen.
Yes.
Okay, so this one is City Pier, New London. So this is for anybody who's been on City Pier.
Okay.
And
A favorite spot?
yeah. Yeah.
One of?
So this one takes place on a Sunday morning, early in the morning.
Okay.
So, City Pier, New London. Seen from the pier, I realize the back of the train station is really its front. Even into the early 20th century, the river was the town's busiest street. The picnic table has welded steel tubing for legs. There are about a dozen such tables spread far apart, all held in place by heavy chains. Winos, loners, a group of old men, and I sit as far apart from one another as possible. Sunday morning, we seem to have nothing better to do than to sit by ourselves and watch each other. And I consider whether having a life with nothing better to do would be a better life. Upriver, the hills are green and wooded as they might have been when New London was called Pequot. I think of the tribes before the whites came, what they would be doing on a morning like this, picking service berries, hunting, fishing, gathering oysters and mussels, or just sitting in the sun, alone or in groups, gazing at the river gliding by. The train clangs in and everyone watches it, the few passengers getting on and off, a happy greeting or two, then off to her car, to the next destination. When the tracks were first laid, they ended at the river, and the passengers boarded a ferry to Groton, where another train waited to continue the journey to Boston. The crowd changes as morning wanes. The do-nothings replaced by sightseers, joggers, people with dogs. A man and a woman work the pier, handing out religious pamphlets, The Awesome Universe. It says the universe is all one great plan, and God has a plan for each of us. I wonder, from the context of eternity, what difference a plan for any of us would make. Clouds are massing in the blue sky. On each of the pilings, a seagull stands motionless. After the missionaries wander off, I'm visited by a white butterfly bouncing chaotically on the air. God's messenger, telling me to rise and leave, get started on the day's tasks, as if they mattered.
Very nice. And these three books are all part of this Runway series.
All right.
Why don't you tell us kind of the names of the three in the series?
Okay, so the first one is Runway Lights, Life in the Undercloud. Let's see if I can
Hold it
do a
up
better
here.
job of that. There you go. And then the second book was called Runway Lights Calling Home.
Is it in?
And the third book is Runway Lights, The Unknown and Forgotten.
Okay.
And
And we look it up as
This-
Charles Chase,
yeah,
poet.
right.
Great.
And I just wanted to show one more book.
Absolutely.
This is an anthology called Birdsong, which I've had a couple of poems included in.
Okay.
But I really recommend it if you're into birds, because every poem in here is about birds, and it's quite a good collection.
You want to read one of
So-
yours?
Sure. Okay, so this poem is called Whippoorwill. A few years ago, in our makeshift barn with the collapsed roof, a whippoorwill took residence for 3 consecutive nights. So shrill and censorious, another joined in the testimony from the edge of our neighbor's woods. Only 3 nights, but never was darkness measured so precisely. The birds have not returned. There's been no need. Illness and misfortune rake our days. The ominous whippoorwill.
So what gets you inspiration to be able to write this stuff? I mean, I could understand Victoria's coming from a very different perspective, a very obvious perspective that enables her to write out all these wonderful stories.
Yeah.
Where does your shining perspective come from? What is it that drives it?
I mean, all sorts of things, and so sometimes it's from things that I read, and I will read specifically to find something that might be
trigger.
Might trigger something. And the City Pier New London poem was I had a period of time where I was going to places I'd never been to before, just as a possible inspiration for a poem. But most of them just occur. We did have a whippoorwill that did spend 3 nights in the dilapidated barn in the back of my yard, and another joined. The neighbor joined in, and it was so spooky. That gave me this sort of feeling, and so that feeling was what really generated the poem. So
That's great. Because I'm always interested. I'm not a poet. I am I've written nonfiction, and I'm a novelist. So I'm always interested to why someone with a flair for the language would then choose poetry versus short stories versus even being a theatrical work. To be playwrights, to be an O'Neill or a Tennessee Williams, who are very lyrical, in fact, in their plays.
For me, I have a short attention span.
Oh,
I really
okay,
do,
okay.
and I get very impatient. So I'll work on a poem, and then I'll just get sick of it and walk away from it for a month and come back to it later on. To write something like a novel, and I did have a few attempts when I was younger. I just got so bored and so sick of the subject, and it just was, so I like. A lot of what I write are narrative poems, but it's great. I can have an idea. I'm an idea person.
Okay.
So I'll get an idea, and I can get it down. It's nice and short, and get it done, and move on to the next idea. Why would I want to spend 2 years writing a novel about one idea when I could instead write 100 poems about 100 ideas?
I got you. So, I got you. Do you share that kind of perspective?
Oh, I just get bombarded by ideas when I listen to people or see them, and it just happens, and I want to write it, and I'll thank God for iPhones, because I'll sit there and write it out, and then or I'll write notes. And,
okay.
I had an idea this morning about something, and as I was driving about that I had talked to. The example is the little girl at the restaurant at Chick-fil-A in the bathroom, mentioning how her parents were lucky to come back. So I wrote a poem. The story was, I was in the bathroom, washing my hands. A lady was in there with this little girl, and they knew each other but really didn't. The little girl that's 5, 6 years old, bouncing around, says, "And what do you do?" She said, "I work for a big man on the base, and I'm his head secretary." And she said, "Well, guess what my parents do?" And they went overseas, and they were deployed at the same time. And they came home just now for Christmas. And they did not come home in body bags. I almost fell over.
Right. That a child should have such a perception.
And I'm home with them now. And then she ran out and went into Chick-fil-A, and they had a big playground here, and she was playing and laughing and giggling, and I saw her with her father. So I just had to write it. I just have to, they just come. It's just seeing the sky or seeing beauty or just hearing people. It's like your dad. You had mentioned your dad with the mules. I'm thinking, I have to write this as soon as I can get out of here. So yeah. And It was funny when you suggested that Harriet write that.
she is not totally receptive to the idea. But if you think about it, for Harriet, what that means is, oh my God, another 2-year novel, you know?
I didn't think about that. I did not think about that. Because me, I could just see it. Man, this will work out.
Yeah, that is wonderful. Well, I try to weave in stories, but as Charlie says, you know, my novels, I have one right here. It's called, my first one is called Loose Ends, and it becomes sort of, I wrote it 10 years ago, but it became topical all of a sudden because one of the minor characters in there is the Russian President Putin, our next president's best friend. So, and it gives you, it's about Russian Americans, Russian immigrants. And I myself am an immigrant, but not me personally, but my family. And so there is this whole idea of us being immigrants and modern immigrants. So there are people who came here in the latter part of the 20th century who are still coming here. And for them, unless it's a war zone, you go back. You go back and forth regularly. So my characters are Russians, and they are not really based on anyone in particular, but I used to do a bunch of work, social work as a volunteer with a group that was working with Soviet Jews who came in the 70s and 80s. And we would help them to become Americanized and teach them the slang that they didn't learn in language class and introduce them to American ways. And they would give us these wonderful, incredible stories about what it's like, not so much about, they didn't really talk a lot about what it was like in Russia, but actually what it was like to be in the United States, having come from there. And that gave me really the inspiration to write the story, which is about a New York City police detective who was Russian-born and whose mother was a Soviet dissident and who was jailed and tortured by the authorities, and whose grandfather was a hero of the Battle of Stalingrad. Wow. So Stalingrad is, as it is with even today when you talk to people who are Russian, they will tell you that that was the great epic battle and that the Russian army saved the world from the Nazis. And they believe that because I was recently in St. Petersburg, Russia, and people would talk about that, and they would say that, in fact, you, meaning me as an American, don't understand the great sacrifices that the Russian people made for themselves and for the world. And so in my book, there is Putin, who's an important character, not only because he's the president of Russia, but because he represents a certain kind of personality that, in fact, Russians to this day love. I mean, Putin is extremely popular in Russia, and he's popular for reasons why we don't particularly like, because it's autocratic. We live in the land of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that's a kind of concept that is actually foreign, I think, to a lot of people who haven't grown up in democracy. So that's part of when I write about these immigrants, is this whole, particularly the Russian immigrants, talking about people who've come from a society where someone told you what to do, and you did it. He talks about going to, his mother thought that he should study the ballet, and of course in Russia ballet is very popular. But he wasn't, the state decided that he wasn't good enough. So they thought he would make a better swimmer, so he went and took swim stuff. And then there's reaches a certain level and he's not good enough, so he has to choose something else. I mean, that's a society that we are not accustomed to. And he often talks about this whole idea of the pursuit of happiness, because that's such a foreign idea. Why does the government want you to be happy? It seems like it doesn't make any sense, you know, to work hard, perhaps, you know, to make money, to be part of the society. But to be happy, I mean, that's a kind of oxymoron to them.
Yeah,
so I write this stuff, and people would tell you fascinating stories. They come here. I remember this guy from Hartford, he said he came here, and in Russia, they didn't come from the big cities, but they came from a city, and everybody would come and sit on their front porches, and people would talk at night after people had come home from work and had eaten dinner, and the streets were crowded. And it's cold in Russia, but the streets were crowded. He came here, and he actually used the words, he thought it was like that a neutron bomb had fallen, because there was not a soul on the streets. No, and the buildings were intact. Not a soul on the street. People did not come down and chit-chat after a day of work and having dinner. So, you know, those were kind of stories that kind of meshed into creating my characters.
cool.
So,
Yeah,
so
Sounds
I,
good.
I've never heard you really talk about that.
Sounds
the book
really
that
good.
way before. It makes it interesting for sure.
And so I'm always interested in what sparks the creative idea, because it's clearly different for different people.
Yeah.
We have very different, like we were chit-chatting before, I would have never thought to even write a story about my father's experiences during World War II, because it's sort of part of growing up. And I'm not a poet, so I would not write poetry about it. But again, it's sort of, that's not a spark that generates anything but a chuckle about my dad and what he did in his life. And so recently, my parents are both gone, and I found letters that my father had written to my mother while he was in the service.
Wow.
And, they were very sweet. My mother always said he was a wonderful letter writer, that he should have been a poet, because he used to write these lovely, and he was in very exotic places. So she would get these letters that were really quite interesting. He was in North Africa, he was in India, he was in China, he was in the jungles of Burma.
Wow.
So he had these really, he came from a very normal middle-class life, and then, in the Army, that's what happens.
Yeah, right.
You go into a war, and they just tell you what to do, and you don't have any choice about where to go. You just go where they send you. So it's kind of, really interesting. And then he took, maybe 1,000 photographs of these, kind of really, for us, strange people. And that's kind of, that, I could do something with the letters. In fact, I've had a guest here who collected the letters of her, great-great-grandfather, who was in the Civil Wars in the Union, who wrote love letters or letters to his wife. And she somehow got into possession of this. And I had her on my show, and she made a little theatrical, like a show based on these letters. And we got an actor to play her grandfather, a great-great-great-grandfather, and someone played his wife, and I played the narrator, and we did this whole little
great
show.
idea. That's a great
it was
idea.
a wonderful, because these people had never gone anywhere. We're talking about 1860s in upstate New York, and people didn't travel at all. Him being in the Army, in the Union Army, was like, in its own way, a great adventure. But she writes about how she now, at 17 years old, is running the family farm because all the men are at war.
Wow. Yeah.
So talking about all the farm problems and how she worries about having food to eat. And that kind of stuff. So that's, that was absolutely, you can do a lot of stuff. Lots of plays have been written based on some kind of letter writing. I think that's a great attraction. I don't know if anybody writes letters anymore, of course.
I would love to see your father's letters in a book with those pictures. I think it'd be a bestseller. It would be interesting.
Yeah, perhaps.
It'd be National Geographic in the 40s.
Right.
In fact, do you remember when I was on the other time, one of the people with me was Mary Elizabeth Lang?
Yes,
She is putting together a memoir of letters from her father to her mother.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he was off in the war and all of that.
Right.
So, yeah.
I think that for a lot of people, and of course in the old days it was only men, they would go for the first time in their lives. They would be going to places that were absolutely the strangest things they had ever would have imagined. My father never went back to India, China, or Burma, but he did go back to North Africa. Years later, he went back and visited. But again, these are, people, and you met people from all over the country who were with you in a unit. And you may not even like them, but your life depended on them all depending on each other. So you got a whole different sense of duty and just survival from people who, if you were living in the neighborhood, would never consider them even friends. But my God, you're in a war, and they're more than friends. They're people that if they don't do what they're supposed to do, you might die. So, or other people would die. So it's kind of an interesting things that happen. And of course, your experiences with the modern wars are very different, because so few people know people who are actually in Afghanistan and Iraq. I
Yes.
mean, because we have no draft, lots and lots of people have absolutely no concept about what it's been to war. The only people who might know is if there were someone in the family who had served in World War II, served in Korea, served in Vietnam, so they have a sense about what it is to be in conflict like that.
Yes, and I have a writer friend, and she read my book from another friend, and she sent me a card. And in her card, she said, "I've known you for a long time, and I could not believe what you have gone through as a mother and a parent and a wife. And my children did not serve, and it's just amazing that you were so calm and quiet about everything. What can I do?"
Right.
You sit on your hands and pray,
Right.
and things will work out, you hope. So, but yeah, no, it was amazing what she said. And that she was in tears reading the book. There's a lot of other stories in my poetry about people coming home and then being with their grandma and then having PTSD and then jumping off a bridge. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Everything's fine. He's out there gardening, and that was another story in there. But yeah, I was amazed what she wrote to me. I thought, freedom isn't free. It's not free. We all pay for it in one way or the other, and thank God we are free.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
That we do live a life of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I mean, and it is a foreign concept to a lot of people in the world. A lot of people who even actually who come here as immigrants. They have to truly learn what it is to live in this country, because a lot of places you have no freedom. I mean, even the simple freedom, right? I mean, like in the Soviet Union, you couldn't stay studying ballet because they decided you weren't good enough, and only the very best who was supported by the state. So, okay, that's just the way it is, and you don't really think about it. So that we are really
We're blessed.
Absolutely.
And in my job, I had students who come from, in New Haven, would come from all over, and they would say a lot of the things you're saying, which is amazing. And I wrote one about a Vietnam girl who came her junior year in high school, and I called her the Americanization of Emily.
Yeah.
Because she's here and she's staying here, and a lovely young girl. But when I was writing some of these poems, I was thinking, she's not like that at all. She's a wonderful, woman. And a young man from Ukraine who came to New York City and said, "Where are the trees?" Which I thought, he thought we had mountains and trees in New York City.
That's amazing.
Yeah, great people.
So I want to thank my guests for coming here and sharing their poetry and their wonderful stories. And, Charlie, we'll have you back on with something to do with that wonderful art center. People should love it, should utilize it. And everyone, what's the name of the book?
2 stars.
2 stars.
Reflections of a Military Wife and Mother.
Okay,
And
great.
it's on Amazon.
Okay, and we have
write a comment.
right, and Charles Chase, poet. Go back on Amazon and go ahead and read your poetry.
Yeah.
And I thank my guests for being here.
Thank you.
And I
Thank you
want
for
my
having us.
audience to know that I will be appearing on January 31st at the Mystic and Noank Library talking about the Great Battle of Stalingrad and talking and reading from my novels. And I think you'll enjoy it. You'll find a perspective. And since Russia is our new best friend, or maybe our old worst enemy, come and learn. And I love questions. So this is Harriet Grayson, your host and producer of Community Culture Showcase. Enjoy. Happy New Year. And love arts and all the people who do it for you. Thank you.
Thank you.